Thank you, Pascal. It is indeed an exciting day. I am one of the politically homeless Canadians who turned to the Canadian Future Party because I did not see myself reflected in any of the existing political parties. J'ai été impliqué dans la politique pendant la majeure partie de ma vie. Entre mes études du premier cycle et mon diplôme en droit, j'ai travaillé comme collaboratrice sur la colline du Parlement. J'ai été fortement impliquée dans la dernière course à la direction du Parti conservateur et j'ai été membre ou supportrice à long terme des partis progressistes conservateurs et conservateurs. Until a few months ago, I was president of my riding's Conservative electoral district. But I became disenchanted with the options I saw. We have a fiscally incompetent government and an opposition who responds to that with policies by rhyme and a boatload of snark. Meanwhile, our countries and its citizens suffer from various crises. Affordability in general, cost and availability of housing in particular, healthcare, a sputtering economy, climate change, and a loss of influence and prestige amongst our allies in the democratic world. Je ne veux pas et je ne suis pas intéressé par des mesures pour résoudre ces problèmes existentiels qui sont motivés par le puritanisme idéologique, que ce soit à gauche ou à droite. Je veux un parti politique qui les abordera avec des solutions basées sur des preuves, le bon sens et un jugement éclairé. I want a political party that will implement policies because they are effective, not because they will slice and dice the population into tiny wedges to gain some kind of electoral advantage. And I want to see that communicated by leaders in a respectful and civil tone that reflects the seriousness of what it is we do when we assume roles in public service. Ce qui est perdu aujourd'hui dans le service public, c'est qu'il est là pour servir les Canadiens. Pas le parti politique avec lequel vous êtes aligné et pour lequel vous feriez un virage à 180 degrés si cela pouvait vous donner un léger avantage sur vos adversaires. I was born in Whitehorse, grew up in Vancouver, Regina, and Edmonton, and have studied or worked in Kingston, Ottawa, Montreal, and Toronto. I presently live in Vancouver. I am privileged to have lived in so many diverse and beautiful regions of our country, and my sole aim is to ensure the greatness of Canada going forward. I'll now turn it over to our interim leader, Dominic.
Thank you so much, Tara. And thanks to the press gallery for hosting us this morning. Pascal, thanks for helping with moderation. And thank you for being part of the launch of Canada's newest political party. And so I think the first and most obvious question is, why on earth do we need a new political party in Canada? Short answer, Canadians have been asking for this. They've said that they want a government that is fiscally responsible, socially liberal, that spends carefully, that recognizes that the role of government is not to control citizens, but to make it easier for all of us to live the lives that we want. So until today, no party is offering that combination. We do. The Canadian Future Party is for all Canadians, and I promise that we are going to be courageous, we are going to be competent, and we are going to be evidence-based. Ce parti a été créé parce que les Canadiens l'ont demandé. Les Canadiens et Canadiennes disent vouloir un gouvernement qui soit à la fois fiscalement responsable et socialement libéral, qui dépense avec prudence et reconnaît que le rôle du gouvernement n'est pas de contrôler les citoyens, mais de faciliter la vie de chacun pour que nous puissions vivre comme nous le souhaitons. Jusqu'à aujourd'hui, aucun parti n'offrait cette combinaison. Nous le faisons. Le Parti Avenir canadien est pour tous les Canadiens et Canadiennes. Nous serons courageux, nous serons compétents et fondés sur des preuves. So why courage? Because our country today in 2024 is facing challenges more serious than at any time since the Second World War. Our current leaders are bluntly misleading Canadians about the severity of multiple crises in front of us. In the face of social media division, economic uncertainty, and hostile foreign states seeking to undermine our democracy, the need for clarity and the need for courage has never been greater. Courage means being honest about what government cannot do, and courage means being honest about what government must do. Courage means looking at government programs, recognizing their flaws, and offering honest solutions to fix them. And that's where competence comes in. It's not enough for a politician to say something must be done. There must be a plan to turn announcements into results. Without a plan to make democracy deliver, the best ideas won't just fail, they'll end up by undermining faith in democracy. This party is led by citizens acutely aware of the limits of both the public and private sector, by the need for balance, and most of all, by the need for government to deliver for its citizens. And that's where evidence-based politics comes in. We're going to approach every problem by looking at evidence. That's our ideology. By looking at facts, by sharing our research, our methodology, so Canadians can understand how we arrive at our policy conclusions. For example, that means no time wasted arguing about climate change. It's real. What matters is how we unleash our creative forces to fix it. Mais les faits ne suffisent pas. Si nous avons appris quelque chose de la dérive vers un gouvernement basé sur le populisme ou les relations publiques, c'est que les valeurs comptent. Dans un ensemble clair de valeurs, tout dirigeant, tout parti, tout pays peut être poussé ici et là par les marées de l'opinion publique, par les efforts pour influencer l'opinion. So I want to be clear about our values, because I think that's a conversation that's too often escaped from our discourse in recent years. We believe Canada's history, including its darkest chapters, have provided today's generations of Canadians with the wisdom that we need to continue to improve our country. All countries have those dark chapters. What matters is the work that Canada and Canadians do today to shine light into those dark spaces, and just as important, to make sure that we shine that light forward to navigate the dark paths ahead. Nos valeurs sont claires. Nous croyons que l'histoire du Canada, y compris ses chapitres les plus sombres, a fourni à la génération actuelle de Canadiennes et Canadiens la sagesse nécessaire pour continuer à améliorer notre pays. Tous les pays ont ces chapitres sombres. Ce qui compte, c'est le travail que le Canada accomplit aujourd'hui pour éclairer ces espaces obscurs. C'est pourquoi le Parti Avenir canadien est résolument inspiré par le passé de notre pays, avec tous ses défauts, et enthousiaste pour notre avenir. L'arc de l'histoire humaine nous mène vers plus de liberté, une plus grande richesse et une plus grande égalité d'opportunités pour tous nos citoyens. So we're arguing that for too long, Canadians have been asked to play a political shell game. Under the shell, on the left, the social programs you need. But along with it, too often, you have to buy bloated government, ever-increasing spending, divorced from delivering results. Under the shell on the right, we're supposed to find fiscal discipline. But along with it, too often, there's a mean-spirited approach that blames the most vulnerable for their plight, selfishness masquerading as liberty that happily misdirects government resources to the wealthy and polices our bodies and our bedrooms. The Canadian Future Party proposes to move not left, not right, but forward. The sterile argument about whether the government should intervene in all sectors of the economy or in none is over. We have over 100 years of hard evidence that shows a mixed economy in an open and caring society is what works. Le gouvernement n'a pas à surveiller les comportements privés qui n'affectent pas les autres. Les tribunaux existent pour protéger ces droits et doivent être utilisés. Les questions politiques concernant ces droits sont réglées et toute tentative de les utiliser à des fins politiques par une quelconque partie devrait être condamnée. So, what are we offering? We're starting off by campaigning on 5 broad planks. A discussion on Canadian values and better governance. We commit to democracy and open society, to defined individual rights and collective responsibilities. One concrete example. We will adopt the British system that we already copied most of our political system from to force party leaders to earn their caucus's support for every vote, not just for budget and confidence motions. The dictatorship of party leaders is a choice made by Canadian party leaders. It's up to us to end it, and the Canadian Future Party wants to play its part. 2, we want to make democracy deliver. by reforming government programs, opening up competition wherever possible, while guaranteeing universal public accessibility. We want to see the Hillier Plan for Housing implemented to help solve our housing crisis, combining the energy of the public and private sector to build houses now. Number 3, to increase Canada's defence spending to 2% of GDP, defending democracy abroad means strengthening it here at home. And part of that is a plan for a universal citizens' resiliency corps to support community vibrancy and disaster relief efforts across Canada, giving our young people skills, building our national identity, and allowing our armed forces to focus on national defence and global security. 4, to restore faith in an immigration system that was for a long time the pride of the world and has been opened up to incredible attacks and damage by this Liberal government. We need a plan to fix the temporary and student immigration system. When Mr. Poilievre talks about the need to eliminate gatekeepers, our current immigration crisis shows what happens when we allow that to happen. The Liberal government eliminated the gatekeepers, took political action to overturn standards that had protected our immigration system, and that's why we have an immigration and housing crisis today. We need better gatekeepers, not to get rid of them. Number 5, to make life more affordable and increase incomes by dismantling the protectionism that sees our political parties cozy up with big business, big labor, and foreign dictatorships to fix prices that benefit them and hurt the middle and working class. We're going to open our telecommunications, airlines, and agricultural sectors to competition. So, in short, that's what the Canadian Future Party is all about. Courage, results, and evidence. Most importantly, this party is about you, Canadians. Are you fed up with extremism? Fed up with promises that cost you money but don't deliver results? Join us and help us build this movement. Not left, not right, but forward. Thanks very much for listening and look forward to taking questions.
Great, thank you. Now we'll turn to questions from the room. And I will start with in the back, Ian. Just before, at the beginning of the question, please state your name and affiliation. And go ahead, Ian.
Ian Bailey, Globe and Mail. I've seen reports that you'll be running candidates in the 2 pending by-elections, the Salamar, Verdun, and Elmwood-Transcona. But how many candidates are you hoping to run in the next federal election, which is obviously looming in the many months ahead?
Thank you. We intend on running as many candidates as we can in accordance with our strict nomination and vetting procedures.
And let me fill in on that. Our nomination procedures are going to make sure that as much as possible the Canadian Future Party is protected from foreign interference. Only Canadian citizens will be allowed to vote in our nomination contests, and we will be doing everything we can and have already been working hard with security experts, IT experts, to make sure that our party is as free from interference by foreign actors as is possible.
Could you elaborate on that? Like, what's your concern? And also, if you're not running, shall we say, the full deck of candidates, I mean, what kind of limitations will that place on you? How will that affect your goals?
So I don't, again, as President MacPhail said, we are expecting to run as many candidates as we can based on our strict nomination criteria. One of the things I want this party to be is a no-nonsense party. We're not going to give you spin and rubbish about saying, oh, we're going to do this and that and the other thing. We're a new party launching today. We've got massive interest from across the country. We had 2 candidates lined up for the by-elections that have already been called before they were called. And we expect that enthusiasm to continue. But whether this party grows or not depends on the work that Ms. MacPhail and I do, the rest of our team does across the country. But in the end, it's up to Canadians to decide whether they want to see the Canadian Future Party be an option for Canada's future. If they do, we're here.
All right. Go ahead.
Adam Hiras with the New Brunswick Telegraph-Journal. Dominic, I guess obviously you're not going to parachute into the 2 by-elections, but do you plan to run in Fredericton? What's your plan as interim leader in terms of how long you'll have that role, and then for the federal election?
So we'll be having a convention in November and be deciding on how the party is structured going into the campaign expected for next year. And in terms of where I'll be running, I absolutely expect to run. It would be odd to be leader of a party and not to run for it. And making the decision on where exactly over the coming months in consultation with the team. Obviously, I continue to represent the Fredericton constituency in the provincial legislature, and that job finishes up next month or the month after, depending on the decision of Premier Higgs, and we'll be making a decision on that some point after that.
A follow-up, I mean, you've done this to a degree before. You took the New Democrats in New Brunswick from a distant fifth party to something respectable. I wanted your take on how that is similar or different from what you're doing here. And then also your strategy there was to run a provincial campaign, and it's often been criticized if maybe you would have focused on one or two ridings, you could have got yourself into the legislature and made a bigger difference. Do you take that lesson there and apply it here?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I would be a pretty bad candidate for any office if I didn't learn from experience and learn from mistakes. And certainly the experience from my time in New Brunswick, you said, helping to build a political party up really from nothing. There are some areas in which that's the same as this current project with the Canadian Future Party. Some areas where it's different. One of the great things about starting a new party is that we can be very clear about our principles, and we don't have the baggage that some of the old parties have. That if someone comes up to us and says, I'd like to join your party, but I don't think climate change is real, we can say, Mr. Poilievre is looking to talk to you. That's just fine. We welcome your engagement, but not in our party. If you say you don't support a woman's right to choose, again, there are other options for you out there, not the Canadian Future Party. If you say that you don't believe in resolving land claims within 10 years to actually stop talking about First Nations issues and apologizing to First Nations people and actually dealing with those problems, we're here to say that's what we're offering. If you don't like that, find another home. So we're going to be pretty strict about what we talk about and our expectations, not just for us as the leadership of the party, but also for our members, that we are not interested in continuing the foolish culture wars that have ripped our national politics apart and ripped politics across the Western world apart, and we're not going to play that game. So there's a huge advantage in having a new party where we can be very clear about what we believe in from the start and make it clear what we believe in, and that if folks have contrary ideas, they have other homes that they can look for. Welcome their engagement, but not with us.
Will you focus on a few ridings and not 300 plus?
I think that'll be a question which I'm absolutely going to listen to the leadership of the Canadian Future Party. I think you're quite right that my insistence on running a full provincial campaign back in 2014 cost me a seat in the legislature, and I don't think that was the right decision. So one of the other things you're going to hear from me is when I make mistakes, and Adam, we've worked together for a long time, you know that I just come out and say, I made a mistake. And I'm going to keep doing that.
Okay, in front, go ahead.
Good morning, Lisa Mayer, CBC News. You said you've got candidates lined up in those two by-elections that are just over a month away, a couple days off of a month away. When will you be announcing who those are, or can you announce them today?
Mark Curry is already our candidate on the ballot for the Montreal by-election, and Mark's a fantastic guy, and we'll be sending out some communications about him and having the kickoff for our first ever campaign as the Canadian Future Party tomorrow afternoon in Montreal. I hope folks come and join us. And for the Winnipeg campaign, we have just getting our candidate on the ballot there, and we'll have news there in the next couple of days.
And my follow-up question, the Conservatives are leading quite steadily in the polls and have been for a while. What makes you think this is something Canadians want?
The polls are very clear about it. They're tired of Mr. Trudeau. They want an alternative. But there's also a lot of people who are uncomfortable with the extremism and divisiveness that has approached Mr. Poilievre's approach to politics since he became leader of his party. And we aim to offer an alternative to that. I was shocked the other week that Mr. Poilievre, the leader of a conservative party, came out and said he refused to promise to increase defense spending to 2%. He is riding on the coattails of the American MAGA movement, and that sort of politics is not Canadian. Equally, when the Liberals talk about how everything is just fine and sunny ways, they're living in the 1990s. We have got to have a realistic 2024 approach to politics based on Canadian needs. So I think that Canadians are looking for a positive alternative. Whether they like what we have to offer, we'll find out in the weeks and months to come, and that's up to Canadians to decide.
If I can add to that, it's clear when Canadians are surveyed that about 70% of them say they don't have a political home. They don't like the options on the left or the right. And we've moved away from a policy and tone of moderation and keen judgment and civility. And when I speak with Canadians, they say they'd like to see more of that. So we do think that we are helping to fill a vacuum that exists.
We will go back to the room. Ian, you had another question?
Yes, to Ms. McPhail first. What kind of you mentioned you were a conservative, I think you were head of an EDA. Could you say where that was? And also what kind of reaction have you had from conservatives you know and such, given this step you've taken?
Yes, I live in Vancouver, and so the EDA was in Vancouver.
Which riding?
At Vancouver Kingsway. And the reaction is what you would expect, unhappiness, and a view that I've deserted the party. My response is the party deserted me. The Conservative Party today is not the Conservative Party of Brian Mulroney. It is not a centrist party. It is not moderate in terms of policy or tone. And we know that Canadians tend to hug the center. They are looking for good judgment, civility, and moderate, rational policies. And to be frank, I think those are missing in today's Conservative Party, and so that is what I say to my Conservative friends.
Mr. McCarty, you're the interim leader. Will you be the leader going into the next election? Are you able to say, what's the process going to be?
We'll be having a convention coming up in November, and so right now we have an interim leadership structure with myself as leader, Ms. McPhail as president. We have a national council, which includes former NDP MP, and we have people from different parties who are participating in the leadership role, and those will all be confirmed or changed in a fairly normal convention in the fall. The process has to be adjusted somewhat because of the short timelines between our approval by Elections Canada, which took considerably longer than we had expected. So we have, again, some very strict rules around our nomination procedures, so we have to amend those for our first convention simply because of timelines. But certainly my hope is to be able to lead this party into the next election, but it's up to the folks involved in the party to make that decision.
A question for both of you. What's your sense of how you've been received in Quebec? Obviously in a key electoral battleground going into the next election. What's the sense of interest you've had from that?
I think the sense of interest is strong. I think Quebecers, like other Canadians, are unhappy with the options before them and are delighted and enthusiastic about the prospect of another alternative. I would like to add to the answer I gave to your question a moment ago about response from Conservatives. I should also say that there are many Conservatives who are unhappy with the leadership style and the policies espoused by Mr. Poilievre and are delighted that they may have another option to look to.
We have another question from Adam. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one. What does success look like? A registered party gets 50% of their spend back if they get 2% nationally, 5% in the ridings they run. Is that the bar, or what is a success in your mind?
Success is changing Canada. I'm serious. You know me long enough. I mean that. I don't care about parties. I care about the country. Parties are a vehicle to make change. And we're going to offer a program that's going to have some fairly new ideas, different from the other parties, to change the country. And if we're able to meet that, that's fantastic. If the other parties take our policies, that's great too. We're here to try and make as loud a noise as we can about sane, evidence-based decisions. And the more that we can obviously reach those technical thresholds for getting money back in elections, yay. But if we do that and don't change anything, then we failed. So the goal is to change the way that Canada works. Because right now there's lots of things in Canada that aren't working properly. Canada isn't broken, but it needs an upgrade.
You mentioned the convention coming up in November. Do you have registered party members right now? And if so, how many?
We just became an official party, so Elections Canada has a very arcane system for becoming registered. I don't have our current membership numbers. I know they've gone up a lot since last night when the news about today's launch happened. But we have had 250 founding members were required to submit to Elections Canada before we could even become a registered party. I don't know if Tara, if you wanted to fill in on that.
No, I think you've covered it quite well. Thank you.
And a follow-up, what is your plan for funding?
To go and talk to as many Canadians as possible about how they should chip in the price of a couple of beer, the price of a meal out, something that they think is worth sacrificing to help a party offer a new alternative to Canadians. So one of the things I'm pleased in Canada is we don't have big money dominating Canadian politics. We have strict limits on spending. So we're going to go out and try and use that system to raise as much money as we can to get our message out.
And we have another question from Ian.
The polls, you're no doubt aware of public opinion polling, suggests the federal Conservatives have a massive lead over their rivals, the other parties. Obviously, the voters haven't gone to the polls yet, but in the election's a ways off. What kind of challenge do you think that polling research presents to you? What's your sense of it? Is the game over before it begins?
Well, obviously, we don't think the game's over, otherwise we wouldn't be here kicking it off. And we don't think that it's over because when you look at those same polls, you see a lot of Canadians who say that today they're parking their vote with Mr. Poilievre, saying they're not particularly comfortable with him. They've got concerns about his tone and his attitude and his approach. They've got concerns about someone who out-campaigned Max Bernier's crazy fringe party to the right, saying in the Winnipeg by-election that the World Economic Forum owned Mr. Bernier. One of the most appalling things I've seen in Canadian politics. Just foolish. So again, we're going to be a no-nonsense party that I think is going to put some clear ideas out there, and it's going to challenge the Liberals and the Conservatives to come back with sensible policies of their own, because I think that's what Canadians want. So our hope is that we can take advantage of this moment when it's clear Canadians do want a change, but they are not particularly comfortable with Mr. Poilievre, that we'll offer them something new, different, and positive. And we're going to get to work on that starting today.
Lisa, go ahead.
Have you heard from any current MPs who've expressed interest in your party?
Had conversations with a number of MPs. I think there's a lot of folks involved in all parties and none who see the dysfunction in our political system right now. And certainly my experience in 4 years as a cabinet minister in New Brunswick has made me even more acutely aware of how we need change in our politics. So we have got folks around our leadership table who again have backgrounds in all of the major political parties at different levels, including former MPs. And in terms of current MPs, I would guess that a lot of them will be looking to see how we do the next little while. And I hope that we can attract some of them, because there are some great MPs from all parties. And wouldn't it be nice if we could actually start saying that again? That they're not terrible, they're not awful human beings. That there are some fantastic people involved in politics in the different political parties in Canada right now. And we hope that people who are attracted by the values that we're putting on the table right now, regardless of their history, will give us a look. And we'll continue those conversations. And again, if they just take our ideas and not our party card, I'm fine with that too.
Okay, I do not see any further questions, so this concludes our press conference for today. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you, Pascal, and to the press gallery, and for folks who turned up. Much appreciated.
Thank you.